As I record this episode, I'm wrapping up my first year as a manager at a Fortune 100 insurance company. It's not easy being a people leader, especially when you have a family and a writing career to balance. But my experience as a manager taught me some important things about being a writer. So in this episode, I'll be talking about 5 secrets I've learned as a corporate leader that have completely changed the way I approach my writing. I'm Michael Laron, and this is the Writer's Journey podcast, where you get a window into the life of a working science fiction and fantasy author. I'm on a mission to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I share my progress and discover what inspires my books and how I write them. You can find the show notes for today's episode at michaellaron.com/podcast. This week, I'm talking about the writing life. This week, I wanted to spend some time talking about my professional life and the interesting intersections it sometimes makes with my writing life. Now, I prefer to keep my professional and creative life separate, but sometimes they mix, and that's okay. I never thought I would be a manager at a corporation. I never viewed myself as much of a leader in the business sense. I wasn't like the other leader types. But I had a director who challenged me to try it, and I did. And I took over a team of 10 people who depended on me every day. When something went wrong, they looked to me for the answer and guidance. And in the beginning, I knew absolutely nothing and probably frustrated them more than helped. But slowly, I got better at solving their problems and helping each of them develop in their careers. Today, I'm far from perfect, but I like to think that I've got a handle on the basics of being a leader. And being a leader exposed me to some weaknesses as a writer that I didn't really know were weaknesses until I found them. I'd like to share those with you. Number one is that as a leader, I exist to serve my team. The best managers I've ever had always put their teams first. They invested time into taking a personal interest in all of their team members, getting to know them, and helping them not just with the job, but with their careers. Most of the time, that meant challenging them with either additional responsibilities or giving them very honest and direct feedback about how they were doing. I tried to emulate that. There are a lot of red herrings as a manager that can eat up your day. Metrics, projects, dumpster fires, etc. But I don't think that any manager can ultimately be successful unless they actually care about and support their people. It's funny because I intuitively understood this as a manager, and this part of the job came easily to me. But as a writer, I don't know that I was taking the same approach to my readers, my listeners, and my YouTube subscribers. So I changed my approach and focused on serving them better, just like I focused on serving my team. Number 2 is don't be a knucklehead. It's amazing how many people do things that sabotage their careers without knowing. All it takes is one bad perception to ruin people's opinion of you. Optics are everything, right, wrong, or indifferent. That goes when you're driving to work, in an interview, in a meeting, at lunch, or whenever. People are always watching. Everything you say or do has an impact, and people say and do some really, really stupid stuff on the job and in life. I'll leave it at that. Don't be a knucklehead. If you have to ask whether something is a knucklehead move, then it probably means you're being a knucklehead. That's why I take great care to make sure that I don't do anything stupid in my writing career. I've always been careful about this, but being a manager has taught me to be careful in other ways, particularly legally and financially. Number 3 is be your most authentic self. I don't mean the cliche version of this advice or any of that bring your whole self to work crap that's common in corporate circles. I just mean be real with people. Before I became a manager, I was careful about what I said. I sugarcoated things. As a manager, I can't afford to. So if I have to have a tough conversation with someone about their performance or give feedback about a system that's not working, I have to be direct. Not a jerk, but direct. The same goes for writers. And honestly, I like to think that I've done a good job of being authentic with my fiction and this podcast, but I've just gotten better at bringing my authentic self to the page. Every week, I focus on capturing myself on this podcast. Everything you hear is me. No barriers, no filters. Even though this podcast is scripted, I'm being real with you. Being authentic sometimes means choosing paths that may not be commercially viable, not at first. For example, I could have totally done a writing podcast where I interview people every week, or I could have focused on marketing tips for writers. That's what sells. I know that this podcast is not commercially viable, nor do I expect it to be. Yet I do it every week because it's how I can connect with you guys in a way that's different from everyone else, yet true to who I am. It's my way of memorializing my journey. Number 4 is playing the long game. This is something people in the corporate world don't do very well, honestly. They make decisions in the moment without thinking about how it will affect their careers. Managers and executives make short-term decisions that work in the moment without considering how it will affect their teams and customers in the long run. Right, wrong, or indifferent, there are a lot of people acting in their own short-term interest in corporate America or the corporate world, usually to get the next job. Not everyone, but many. That's never been the approach I've taken. Sure, there's a time to make short-term decisions, but I care far more about my happiness in the future. So as a writer, being a manager has given me a whole new appreciation for what it means to think long-term. And I was a pretty good long-term thinker before, but I'm an even longer-term thinker now. So 10, 20, 30 years into the future is something that as a writer I brought to the manager role that kind of helped me see things a little bit better. Number 5 is to manage people through change. The corporate world is full of change. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow, especially when you're a manager. You're always planning for change, communicating change, and managing others through change. And to do that requires many skills. You've got to anticipate the changes and how it will affect your team, and then figure out how to address that. The key is how you communicate. If you think about it, that's what a writer is doing too. When you're writing a novel, you're really just managing readers through your story. A novel's ever changing, right? So if readers get confused with your story, they stop reading. If they get bored, they stop reading. Your job is to keep them interested and engaged. When you're marketing a book, you're also managing expectations. You need to provide clarity on what the book is about and why it's the very book that they need to buy at this very moment. When readers are done reading, you need to convince them why they need to buy your next book or sign up for your mailing list or visit your website or whatever. That's easier said than done, but when it's done right, it's simpler than you think. Being a manager has helped me see this from a different perspective. So those are the 5 things I've learned as a corporate leader. The final takeaway is that I've learned to think of myself as a leader here in the writing space, whereas I didn't before. But just as I lead a team at work, I'm also leading a tribe of readers and a tribe of writers. And my challenge right now is creating content that's worth following me for. And that, my friends, is a constant evolution that I'm still learning. Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed the show, here are a couple ways to help a brother out. If you're listening to this on Anchor, favorite the show. If you're listening to this on a podcast app, do me a favor and write me a review and share it with your friends. You can, of course, visit my website and learn more about my work at michaellaron.com. If you have a question, send me a voice message on Anchor and you just might hear it on the show. Next week, I'll be reading a page from my writer's sketchbook. Until then, I leave you with a quote. A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. John C. Maxwell.